There's still times where, I don't sleep or where my suffering feels really great, but I now know that those medications, what they ended up doing to my body and the degree of suffering I had to go through just to get off of them, I would have never chosen that.
You're listening to Make Some Noise podcast, episode number 507 with guest Melissa Bond. Welcome to Make Some Noise podcast, your guide for strategies, tools, and insight to empower yourself. I'm your host, Andrea Owen, global speaker, entrepreneur, life coach since 2007, and author of 3 books that have been translated into 18 languages and are available in 22 countries. Each week, I'll bring you a guest or a lesson that will help you maximize unshakable confidence, master resilience, and make some noise in your life. You ready? Let's go. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am so glad that you are here. We have another thrilling and exciting interview for you today around recovery. This one is especially interesting. So I have 2 around the same topic. This one from Melissa Bond and then one coming up soon from my friend Lauren Cathcart Robbins, who's been on the show before. Both about benzo addictions, specifically Ambien. As someone who's been prescribed Ambien 2 different times, let me just let these stories speak for themselves. All right. One thing I want to make sure that you are reminded about is the one-on-one sessions that I am offering up for $97. That price has never existed since at least 10 years. 25 spots I opened up. Most of them are taken, but if you want one, and a couple of you have DM'd me, it's fine if we've worked together before. I would love to have you see you on my roster again, get an update and see how I can support you. But it doesn't necessarily have to be about what I talk about on that page, andreaowen.com/one, ONE. And it's a really simple page over there. Just tells you like what to expect, what kind of challenges you might be facing that this session would be great for. And then you just sign up there. You fill out a quick questionnaire so I know what we're both walking into, what you want to walk away with, and we'll go from there. I'm excited to get to, I start tomorrow. I think I start with these sessions. I'm really excited to get on these. All right. If I sound like I'm under the weather, I had to go kind of cold turkey on my ADHD medication that I've been on for, I don't know, 6-8 months. My blood pressure, you guys, got so high. I have a history of chronic hypertension that has been better for so many years, unmedicated. And I wasn't feeling all that great. And I went to the dentist. I don't know why they check my blood pressure at the dentist. Do they do that when you get a teeth cleaning? I saw it first and I was like, whoa, that's not good. And they were like, no, well, let's take it again. Because it was so high. They were like, there's no way that's right. It was. I wasn't all that surprised. So I took it at home later that night and it was 189/114. I was like, oh, that's bad. That's bad. So I called my doctor. She's like, immediately no. You need to get off the ADHD meds. And if you've never even tapered off of an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety medication, consider yourself lucky because it is not an easy thing to do. And they had to get me off it very quickly because of my blood pressure. Anyway, 2 days of tapering and it's been the most unpleasant, but he's just thinking anyway, I won't get into it. I'm not here to complain. I am here to bring you really amazing guests like we have today. And Melissa Bond is no exception. Her book is so good. And just the story. All right, let me tell you a little bit about her. Melissa Bond is a narrative journalist and poet. In the years of her dependence on benzos, the whole word is spelled out there in the bio, but I don't know how to pronounce that. So it's just going to be benzos. Melissa blogged and became a regular contributor for Mad in America, ABC World News Tonight, interviewed her for a piece in January 2014. Melissa is a respected writer on the perils of overprescribing benzos and has been featured on PBS Story in the Public Square, Radio West, and many, many, many other places. Blood Orange Night, which is her book, was published by Simon & Schuster in June 2022. So without further ado, here is Melissa. Melissa, thank you so much for being here.
Oh my gosh. It is an absolute delight to be here with you.
Oh, I'm so glad. This is my podcast voice.
Hello, podcast voice.
We were talking and giggling and just reminiscing over old addictions and things like that. And so you don't know this, but I do my podcast in themes now, and where we had a women's health theme and we had a therapy theme, and now we're on recovery. So thank you so much for being here and talking about your story and your book, Blood Orange Night. Can you start by telling us start kind of from the beginning? Like, when did it kind of become quote unquote bad? Like, did you get prescribed your benzos for like a illness or something? How did it start?
It started with my second pregnancy. So I had late stage pregnancy. I was like what they consider geriatric. And I had my son when I was, how old was I? 39.
Mm-hmm.
And he was born with Down syndrome. And then I immediately got pregnant again, which I thought was impossible because I was, geriatric, but fertile. However, the second pregnancy, there was this sort of tsunami of personal events that happened. So we all have those times in our lives when we're like, holy bejesus, what's happening? And
I can't take another thing. Yeah.
I can't take another thing. And for me, it was son being born with a disability.
Mm-hmm.
He has Down syndrome. Losing my beloved job as a magazine editor because of the recession. Actually, it's 4.
Oh, so this had happened like around 08.
All of this was in like 08, 09.
Oh, okay.
Just a grim time for everybody, so there's like financial stress. My marriage was already crumbling, and I literally, we were like a year in. And so I was trying not to face that.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally stopped sleeping. So
okay.
That was when I was prescribed Ambien, which I had no idea was addictive. They were just like, oh my gosh, you are going to have a psychotic break. You are not sleeping. I was sleeping like an hour a night, maybe 2. Yeah. And then after my daughter was born, I cold turkeyed. And then they prescribed a month in, I was literally like clawing at the walls again.
Yeah.
And they prescribed Ativan, and that was the start. So it's, it's weird. It's like, I don't know what it was for you, but we all have those times where we know, like, yeah, that's when I fell into the hole. So I don't know what that was like for you.
Well, yeah, I was, I had my friend Laura Cathcart Robbins on, who her predominant drug of choice was Ambien. And it was similar, she had 2 small kids and just wasn't sleeping very well and ended up being prescribed it and fell in love with it. What I was saying when she was on my show was that, anybody who identifies as being an anxious person, which I think even if you aren't that person, but you have a marriage that's on the rocks, you have a child with a disability, then get immediately pregnant again, which can already mess with your hormones and your mental health. And you're in that recession, that will bring on the anxiety. And my point is this, in my experience, benzos, and it was, Percocet, Vicodin, Ambien, I've taken, but for me, it was Valium and Ativan. But like Valium for me was the thing that if I could be in a relationship with just one thing, I don't need food. I don't need water. Just give me Valium. Cause it just softened those edges so much where I felt like nothing could bother me. Everything was just okay.
Yeah. I call it the pharmaceutical hammer, because it absolutely, and that's a pretty aggressive term, but I think because for me, Ativan was the one they prescribed me. And it literally, it just knocked me out when the doctor, so the name I give the doctor that prescribed these to me is Dr. Amazing, because he was, when I walked into his office, he was both a Western, medical MD, family practice doc, and then also really, really billed himself as being this allopathic, very interested in like holistic herbs and other modalities, Chinese medicine, to get to the root cause of dis-ease is how he sort of pitched it. So it felt like he was somebody that was very much like let's look at this from a holistic standpoint. And boy, when I got there, he was just like, oh, you've got something going on with your adrenals, but you have got to sleep. So I'm going to give you something that sounded like it was benign, and that like Valium, we think of it as like, oh, this is just mother's little helper. It's a sort of soft softening of everything. But the Ativan is the like supercharged steroidal version of Valium. And it literally like knocked me out for 7 hours the first night. And I do have to say, like, here's one of the questions I have. Like, these are so widely prescribed, and I had never heard of them, but it feels like we live in this age of things moving so fast. I really wonder how people and what your thoughts are on like why these drugs are so widely prescribed, because we're in this age of anxiety. It feels like we need something to help us simmer down.
Yeah.
And we go to the pill, right? Or we're often prescribed the pill.
Yeah. And it's, for me now, I'm not on anything to help me sleep except melatonin. And I also take magnesium, and I guess that helps a little bit. But it's mostly just so I can like go poop. Like it's like another topic for another theme on this podcast. I know now that it's really what everybody says. Like, you have to have good sleep hygiene. Like, it's all about your phone and just having this routine, like all the things that the experts say. Pills are an easy fix though. I also think, because this is what I learned in my other interview too, is that it tends to not break us down physically. And it's all like this neurological stuff that's happening that we don't see until you're having seizures or you're having like major withdrawals. And did any of that happen to you? I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit.
Yeah. So let's jump ahead, because the question that, it was so weird, because I had been magazine writer and magazine editor. And so research was like in my bones. Like I loved to find out about stuff, and I would get assignments. But I was so desperate after basically like a year of sleeping, maybe 2 to 3 hours a night.
Oh my gosh, it's torture.
It was torture. Like, I think the CIA describes enhanced interrogation techniques as going 45 or 48 hours without sleep. And I was like, yeah, that's about right. Because at that point I would do anything.
Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers inline and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point of sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/noise, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/noise to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/noise. It's hard to find a great mentor who can help me level up. My dream mentor, Shonda Rhimes. So I was really excited when I heard she has a class on Masterclass. With Masterclass, you can learn from the best to become your best. Masterclass is the only streaming platform where you can learn and grow with over 200 plus of the world's best. For just $10 a month, an annual membership with Masterclass gets you unlimited access to every instructor. And you can access Masterclass on your phone, computer, smart TV, or even in audio mode. I'm always looking for ways to be a better writer, so I took Shonda Rhimes' screenwriting class. It helped me gain concrete technical advice, including structuring, the writing process, and with shows under her belt like Grey's Anatomy and Bridgerton, it was so helpful. Plus, every new membership comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Don't wait another moment to start your learning journey with Masterclass. Right now, our listeners get an additional 15% off any annual membership at masterclass.com/Andrea. That's 15% off at masterclass.com/Andrea. Masterclass.com/Andrea.
What happened was I was so desperate, I didn't even look the medication up. And then the cognitive decline was so rapid because I ended up they cycle really fast. The new generation of benzodiazepines, which are Ativan, Xanax, Klonopin, they're super fast in, super fast out, which is why I call them the hammer. Like they knock you out really fast. You don't get like a smooth buzz. I hate to say that, like with Valium, it says that's a softer benzo. Equally, dangerous, I think, long term. But so what happened was my brain was just becoming what they call withdrawal tolerance. I was in tolerance, but I was starting to have withdrawals. So I would stop sleeping. So Dr. Amazing bumped my dose up 2 milligrams within the first 6 weeks. So I was up to 4 milligrams of Ativan, which is
holy shit.
Within 6 months, he had bumped me up to 6 milligrams of Ativan to be taken nightly, doctor prescribed. And at that point,
so it's 6 milligrams in one pill, right? And you have an entire bottle.
It was like 2 milligrams per pill. And I was 3 pills a night, big bottle.
So for reference, people who have no idea, when I was prescribed Ativan, which I was kind of surprised when you said Ativan, but my prescription was only for 0.5 milligram per pill. And it was 1 I was prescribed.
Yeah.
I was like, meh, it's okay.
If you go to the ER and you're having a grand mal seizure, they will shoot you up with 2 milligrams of Ativan. That's how powerful it is. It will stop a grand mal seizure. So to have started me on 2 milligrams was just nuts, but I think it happens more often than we think it does. I don't have statistics on that because it's very hard to get information on like exactly what the prescriptions are in this country. But so what happened was within 6 months, I had lost 20% of my body weight. I couldn't remember what somebody had said to me from one day to the next. I had 2 infants. So I was like, okay.
One with Down syndrome who needs special attention. Oh my gosh.
Right, all of that. And so to go to the grocery store and remember, like I would write down a list of things to go to get at the grocery store. And then I would forget where I put the list. So I was literally like clawing at the edges of the day, trying to just survive. And what happened? Okay. So I've got my little girl. She's like 1.5 years old. She's in the tub. I've given her a bath. We're having this sweet little playtime. She's just the cutest little thing ever. I pick her up, wrap her in a little froggy towel, and I'm walking out the door. And my husband, of course, it is outside. He's a landscaper. He's doing stuff outside, was very, very checked out already at this point. His bandwidth for any kind of illness or emotional need was pretty limited.
Okay.
So at this point, I sort of already felt like I was alone in the house. And I took a step, and they call it jelly legs. There's an actual term for it, where the neurotransmitter that goes and says, oh, okay, this body is taking a step and we need to have muscle contraction. It just doesn't happen. Because the benzos are suppressing 70% of communication with the neurotransmitters. So I'm holding my baby girl, barely any hair on her head, and we are careening towards a corner wall because my legs have stopped working. So I flipped my shoulder and I ram my shoulder and head into the corner wall to protect her. And I'm lying there and I think I finally am like, I'm not just mama sunk. I'm not just exhausted. Something is wrong. And I'm lying there and I think, oh, I've got a brain tumor. I've got to have a brain tumor. Like all of these symptoms, like the lack of balance, the lack of memory, the eye tremors. And then I was like, no, maybe I've got MS. And this was the moment of grace. We were talking about moments of grace earlier, which I know you have, but I suddenly was like, wait, what has changed me from being a really vital, like career-minded, rock climbing, adventuring woman to someone who
conscious,
right? Able to go to the grocery store and remember what to pick up. What changed? And I was like, it's the medication.
Okay. So you did have that moment.
Had that moment. And then 30 seconds later, my legs just like the light came back on and they were working. And I just thought, what is happening to me? So that, so that was the scary point, and I think, I know you've had yours.
Oh, okay. I have so many questions, and I'm thinking of the audience right now of someone who might be in that place of the marriage is kind of crumbling. They might be feeling overwhelmed, whether it's because they are the mother of small children or they have a job that is asking more of them than they have the bandwidth to follow through with, or a relationship that's struggling, maybe with a parent or something like that. And I think for a time, whether it's drinking too much wine at night or using, whether it's a benzo or sleep aids and things like that, it works for a while, right? It helps.
Right.
And then, so do you think that, did you have any moments previous to that one where you fell and could have seriously injured your daughter? Did you have any moments before that where you were thinking, maybe this isn't okay? Or were you fully on board of like, well, if he's prescribing it, then it must be okay?
That's such a great question, because I think we're always navigating, our suffering, and then what is kind of helping us, sort of deal with that suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, and I think this is the question that I'm always interested in with the people, that your podcast is reaching, and anyone that's out there, like, how do we navigate what's okay in terms of how we work through our suffering in this world, know, and especially when we get to those points, like for me, it was so acute. And the fact that I could barely make it through each day. And I was, terrified that I would do something that would put my kids at risk.
Sure.
Like my son with Down syndrome, like he would get out the door and run down the middle of the street. So I always had to be vigilant. Like, are the doors locked? Is the gate shut? Have I gotten the things that they need? Are they, have they fallen down the stairs and maybe
Mm-hmm.
checked out or something? And so for me, I don't think there was ever a time where I thought, well, I'm trading like this for being able to sleep. It really felt like I was so desperate just to get up to like baseline survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is what, like, for me now, what has become the question is, how do we help people when the suffering is that acute?
Mm-hmm.
And then how do we sort of navigate in the most intelligent way possible into a more holistic and more wellness-based recovery?
Yeah.
Because there's still times where, I don't sleep or where my suffering feels really great, but I now know that those medications, what they ended up doing to my body and the degree of suffering I had to go through just to get off of them, I would have never chosen that.
Yeah.
And part of that is just the intelligence of the medical community and informed consent. Like, there are lots of people out there that are just trying to survive. And if they are prescribed that and it helps them for a while and they're not given another option, or they're not
told,
you're
going to say yes.
Of course you're going to say yes. And if you don't know, hey, these things are like radically addictive in the space of a week. If you don't know that, or if you don't know what that means long term, you're going to say like, heck yeah.
I mean, I might even still take the risk if I'm not desperate. At least tell me, like, what should I look for? Or should I tell one of my friends or my partner or my boss, like, what to look for? You know what I mean? Like, those types of things.
Well, one of the things that I always tell people with what I learned was that we're very familiar about, if you take too many opioids, it's going to be really dangerous. You can stop breathing and, die, and it's fatal. With benzos, we haven't had that awareness. And the way I describe it is that opioids are the drug that set fire to your house. And that's the mortality. Like, you can literally like just stop breathing, but benzos are the thief that take everything you own a piece at a time. And when you ask for what to look for, that's what I mean is I started having all of these really intense neurological, GI, muscular symptoms that I could have gone to a million other doctors to try to track down. And they were all related to the benzos. So it's like a slow, well, depending on how much you're taking and how you responds, you slide into disability. And so the thing that I would say is, like, for me, those are like the last ditch, only for a couple of days kinds of things because they can slowly, your memory starts to really, you have whiteout, you have an anterior grade amnesia, you can have really, really bad stomach cramps or GI issues and neurological symptoms. So, yes.
I also don't envy doctors, having to prescribe that and having definitely not long enough appointment with someone to understand their history. What other doctors are you seeing? What's your history with medications or addiction? And what is your support system at home? Like there's so many variables that need to be talked about. And then I don't know, I would worry too much about my patients. Call them, are you okay? Right. Which they'd probably lie if they're not okay, especially if they're someone who's prone to addiction. And so, well, tell us the moment that you knew that something was wrong. So was it that moment of like being on the floor when your legs gave out? Did you check yourself into rehab? Like what ended up happening?
I want to give you two scenes. So that's the first scene from the book where I was just like, holy cow, what is wrong with me? Like, this is not normal parenting exhaustion. And, there's that space of denial too, of how bad things are.
Yeah.
And my marriage is crumbling. I've got 2 kids. Like I've lost my beloved career as a magazine editor. Who am I? So, I'm like going through this like identity crisis along with, trying to just keep the boat from sinking. That was the scene with my daughter. And then I went upstairs and started researching benzos and my jaw fell to the floor. And that's when I was like, oh my God, I have got to get off these things. But all the research that I saw, and actually these occur really close together, the 2 scenes I'm going to describe in the book. So that was the first one. I do the research. I find out you've got to go really, really slow, or you can have a psychotic break or a fatal seizure. So, and really slow means like like cutting a very, very tiny amount. So that night I cut a little bit off of one of my pills and I was like totally determined, like, okay, I'm going to like slowly withdraw off these things. This was back in 2011, I think. And there still are not a lot of facilities that know how to really get people off of benzodiazepines safely because it's a very long-term process. It's not like other withdrawal processes. It can take upwards of a year, if not longer. So, but I was still on my learning curve and I was just, so I cut
your DIY.
Right. DIY. And I wake up, it's the middle of the night after I've cut my first pill. My daughter's crying. I do the like mama wolf. Oh my gosh, what's happening? I think she needs, to nurse, run downstairs, put my hands underneath her little, she's got this little bread loaf body. And all of a sudden I have this explosion of like sound, neon oranges and reds. And I just completely collapse to the carpet and pass out. And we find out later that I have had a stroke.
Oh my God.
That was my first experience with withdrawal. And then it was this long, and then the rest of the book sort of talks about like this kind of come to Jesus moment of, holy cow, I've been on these drugs for maybe a year now, doctor prescribed, and I go through a series of doctors and they don't know how to get me off.
Oh no.
So then figuring out, like finding the person, finding the information and getting the support to be able to like, because there's not really a rehab center. They can sort of get you to the point where you're not going to have a fatal seizure, but you will still likely have withdrawals that could last over a year.
How long do you think it took before you started to feel quote unquote normal again?
I would say 14 months.
I'm kind of like switching gears here a little bit, but I remember when I got your book in the mail and the subtitle really jumped out at me in my journey to the edge of madness. And I feel like madness is such a strong word to use. And I'm actually reading a novel right now that's set like in Europe, I think in England, like right after World War I, and they use the term mad a lot, and it centers around like these soldiers who are in this kind of like asylum, and they throw that word around a lot. And it has such a shame connotation to it, I think, in the context of, across the pond over there. But what was that word? I know that subtitles are chosen very carefully. So what was that for you? Like talk to us about the madness. Like, how do you describe that?
I love that you asked this because it was such it was such a tough point for me. This was chosen by my editor.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, do we really have to go there?
Did it feel like too much truth or something else?
I think it was a truth that I had not yet been willing to admit to, because mental health, it's interesting. Any kind of addiction, dependency, recovery, mental health issues, we're still navigating the shame that circumscribed those things.
Totally.
And I think for me, to admit that I had completely lost my squash for a long period of time was really hard. And the turning point, it was so funny. I talked with my brother and I was like, so Chris, this is the subtitle they want to use, My Journey to the Edge of Madness. And I was like, it feels really kind of strong to me.
It's a little dramatic.
It's pretty dramatic. And he was like, well, he calls me Mouse. That's my I'm really small. He says, Mouse, you didn't sleep. Basically, like you were CIA interrogation level sleeping for over a year. Don't you think you had like completely lost any grip on reality? And I said, you know what? Yeah, of course. Like I was in an alternate reality for a long time, and every possible part of me that felt unstable was just raw and pulsing like an electric wire. So totally. So, but to admit that, like it took me, I had to kind of process through because not only did I not want to admit that I had gotten really dependent upon these doctor prescribed drugs, but I didn't want to admit that I had lost my squash. The cheese was sliding off the cracker. It was terrible. And I think it's a beautiful thing, don't you, to just get to that place of just raw vulnerability and like, wow, I didn't even know how to be human at that point.
Yeah, I think it's a special place of surrender.
Yeah.
I know that's a big word that's used in the rooms of recovery. And I have the word tattooed on my arm because I think we fight it as hard as we possibly can with every strength of our being. And especially, and I don't mean especially that we're chosen or better or anything like that, but for high achieving women who kind of come up in this place of our value is put so much on our productivity and efficiency and how well we can balance everything and like keep the plate spinning, to admit that you dropped them all and you can't pick them up and put the pieces back together anymore. Like that is so incredibly vulnerable. And like you said, like raw and naked. And yeah, it is a special place of surrender to admit like this is no way to live. I cannot do this by myself anymore. Like this has become bigger than me from a mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical standpoint. And for the love of God, somebody help me. Like that, like my hat's off to anybody who gets to that place. And I say a special prayer for you because it's an extraordinarily difficult place to be. Today's podcast is sponsored by MIDI Health. Ladies, are you over 40 like me and dealing with hot flashes, insomnia, brain fog, moodiness, some vaginal dryness, or weight gain? Don't just accept it as part of aging. These symptoms are often linked to hormonal changes during perimenopause and menopause. At MIDI Health, they get it. Their experts know what you're going through and how to help. MIDI clinicians are menopause specialists offering safe, effective, FDA-approved solutions. And guess what? MIDI Care is covered by insurance. So stop pushing through it alone. Schedule a virtual visit and dive deep into your unique symptoms and health background. You'll walk away feeling heard and with a plan to start feeling better. Visit MIDI Health today and reclaim your well-being. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com. joinmidi.com. You know when you're listening to a song on the radio and you get the profound feeling that the song playing was written about you? Now imagine having the power to gift that same incredible feeling to someone you love with an original song from Songfinch that actually is written just for them. Songfinch lets you create an original radio quality song inspired by your own life and the people you love. It's completely unique, personal, and lasts forever. Whether your song is for Father's Day, an upcoming graduation, wedding, or anniversary, or even just a gift to show your loved one how much you care, start your song now to lock in one of Songfinch's top artists. I gifted Songfinch to myself, a song about my late father, and I'm so excited to play you a clip.
Flipping through the slides of learning how to live and how to love, and coming undone, a father daughters without, so she writes it down.
One of my clients heard about Songfinch from this podcast, and so she had a song created for her son who was graduating, and she told me that they both cried when she played it for him and that it exceeded her expectations. For a limited time, Songfinch is letting our listeners upload their song to Spotify for free, so you and the lucky person you gift it to can listen to it anywhere, anytime. Go to songfinch.com/noise and start your song. After you purchase, you'll be prompted to add Spotify streaming for your original song for free, a $50 value. Again, my URL is songfinch.com/noise. Don't forget to share your song with us too. songfinch.com/noise.
Yeah. And I think what I want to add to that, and I love the way you described all of that, because I think for me, because I had been raised, and I talk about this in the book also, I had been raised by an alcoholic mom who had tried to do all of that and had the plates come crashing down really through most of my middle school and then high school years. And then she went into recovery when I was 17.
Okay.
And I had made the kind of unconscious decision that I was not going to be like her. Mm-hmm. I was going to constantly be aware of any kind of addictive patterns and really look towards, I tried to do all the wellness stuff when I was younger, studied Jung, studied shamanism, did all the things, but didn't really address the fact that I was trying to escape that vulnerability somehow.
Yeah.
And so for me, what this whole experience, one of the main gifts that I would say is that I had a kind of hubris. I had this kind of ego around, I'm going to be better. I'm not going to fall prey to the kind of vulnerability that I couldn't even understand at that age. She was also a single mom raising 2 kids.
Yeah.
And when this all happened, I thought, what a jerk I've been.
Mm-hmm.
Really? A single mom, and I just thought, oh my gosh, I get it. It is so, and to be in that state of heart softening, is just, it was the hardest thing I've ever been through, but it has tenderized my heart in a way I don't think anything else has.
Yeah.
To fall to my knees that way and then recognize other people that have fallen in that kind of vulnerability and humanity that comes out of it.
Yeah. I mean, oh God. And that's 2 really big things that you're talking about, your own sort of surrender and just watching the plates fall and just kind of putting your hands on and being like, well, there they go. And, I was just I'm working on my own memoir, and I was writing about this last night about my dad. I don't know if we talk enough about the grief that comes with the moment or moments we realize that our parents are human and incredibly flawed, and that they have a whole life that doesn't revolve around us. And they're also susceptible to the pains and slings and arrows of life. And they had a whole life before we were born. And I know it sounds maybe even a little trite and selfish that I say that, but I think, and I think some people, I want to acknowledge this, some people learn that about their parents far too young. They see things that children should never see, and they bear things and have to grow up entirely too quickly. And regardless, though, I think there's so much grief in seeing our parents as 3-dimensional human beings. I remember, and my dad died in 2016, and it was sort of like a gut punch to be like, oh, he had a whole identity of not being Andrea's dad. And I felt like such an asshole. Like, of course he did. But I think it's so much safer for us to just kind of look at our parents as just our mom or just our dad or, just our sibling and have them just kind of in a way like this one-dimensional life. And so it's a journey to when we see them in all their humanity.
Yeah. And I have to say, so we both have kids now, right? So seeing it from their vantage, my daughter is 13, my son is 14. And I am seeing now, like my daughter has had her dad and I divorced when she was 4. And so she's, had to have some aspects of her growing up that I think I would not choose for her now that she's had to be raised. But she also, I see, like she's 13, so I'm still sort of on the pedestal, but it's going to topple soon. I know that. But I think it's also like, I look at that and I think this is part of their brain development. And it's part of like what's healthy is them being able to kind of project this, like we're these immovable objects of security and, hopefully. And I know for me, part of me wanting to give her that stability was the fact that from a really early age, I didn't have that, my kind of being raised was this constant instability, which has its gifts now, but took me a long time to kind of get to.
Yeah, it's tricky. And I get parenting questions every once in a while if I do a Q&A or something. And I'm like, I am not a parenting expert. I can just tell you what's worked for me and what's not worked. But it's just sort of like feeding scraps along the way of like your own humanity. But yeah, we do want to like be that consistent person and just be sort of on that pedestal and complicated balance. I think one that we all get wrong.
We all get wrong all the time.
I thought it was so funny. My children were aghast when they found out that I had been married to someone else before they were born. So I was married before and I didn't have children with this person. But so it's like, why would they ever need to know, right? They don't have any half siblings or anything. And I remember we were in the car. I don't remember how it came up, but I mentioned, it's like, I was married to someone else before I was married to your dad. And my son, I was looking at him in the rearview mirror and he goes, to who? Like just incredulous. Like what? Like, I think they think we were born and then just automatically like became their mother was a wife. Like,
because their narrative, that's when their narrative starts.
Right.
That is totally when their narrative starts. Yeah.
It cracked me up, but also made me so curious. And I'm like, yeah. And I've done that to my own parents as well.
Right.
So yeah, we got off track here. And I'm curious, so do you identify as an addict?
I don't. And I want to say more about that.
Because I know there's the reason I ask is I know there's a lot of people listening who don't identify as addicts, but might be able to see themselves absolutely in your shoes.
Yeah, I think so. There are a couple things I want to say about it. And this is like such a beautiful question because when I was growing up, I was very, I was like, okay, mom is an addict. She's like self-proclaimed, like, yes. She's like, I love alcohol. I love cocaine. And she's off, has recovered and, has other addictions that kind of come in and out that are healthier. But she was very much like, yes, I'm an addict, went into recovery, not going there ever again. And I had said to myself, I will never go there. I will do everything I can to kind of research, to do my own, psychological journey, philosophical texts. I, practiced meditation from the time I was in my early 20s. So really felt like I'd kind of inoculated myself through my own self, processing. And then all of a sudden I'm completely hooked on Ativan, right?
Yeah.
And what I will say is it's, the reason I say I'm not an addict is it feels like I want it to be a grayer area, actually, than I'm presenting, because I hate this. You're either an addict or you're not, because I feel
definitely on team like gray area. There is such a gray area.
Such a gray area because the way I describe it is there is suffering. Like we all have, whether it's for me, it was insomnia, or there's psychic suffering. There's emotional suffering that we don't know how to deal with. There are reasons we go towards those things that help give us a salve to our suffering. And that is how I view addiction. So I feel like in this culture, we have to ask the question of like, what even is addiction, and how do we other the people that we see as addicts in this culture?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, that's not me.
Right.
I wouldn't do that, which is exactly what I did with my mom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was like, I'm not her. I'm better.
Yeah.
I'm studying yoga. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning meditation so I don't become like you. And I missed her humanity in that. I missed the fact that she was a single mom, you know, with not a lot of support, trying to raise 2 kids, didn't know how to do it. And when I say I'm not an addict, it's mostly that with the Ativan, there was no part of me that was taking it to try and like alter my, I don't know, consciousness to get a high, which is, I think, like our most narrow depiction and our most shameful depiction in this culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I say that, what I want to say is that I actually don't even identify with that description now. I did when I was younger, but I don't now. And now what I see is people we suffer in particular ways, and we find ways to kind of combat that suffering. And that's what I like to talk about.
Same. We're totally on the same page. In like what I do, I talk to a lot of people who are like marketing experts, and like over and over and again, over the past decade and a half, people will ask like, well, what are you selling? And really what I sell, and this is so unsexy and you will never see it on any page to sign up for a retreat or my coaching, is like, I sell better coping skills. Like, but it's like, who wakes up in the morning and is like, you know what I need?
Better coping skills.
I need to find someone who can teach me better coping skills. No one is after that. No one's shopping for that. But it's true. And it took me a bit to figure out that that's what it is that I teach people, partly because I had none. My coping skills were like, I'm going to get into this relationship and this hot guy is going to like take away my suffering, or right. This night out with my friends and too many Coronas, you know, and tequila chasers is going to end my suffering, or graduating from college with honors is going to end I was constantly chasing a way to how I describe it as run away from my life. And by running away from my life, it was just this massive discomfort of being a human, which everyone does. You know, like my daughter's also 13, and like watching your children go through middle school.
It's agony.
It's agony, partly because you remember your own experience. And I remember what did I ask her to do? It was something like, we were at like a Marshall's, and you know, never go to Marshall's and not grab a cart. Like just that was my first mistake. So we're like in the back of Marshall's, and I'm like, can you go up and get me a cart? And she was like, no, that's so embarrassing. And I'm like, oh my God.
Your mom?
But when you're 13, everything is embarrassing. Like it's the invisible audience. You think, but I felt like that most of the time, even when I wasn't in middle school, just like this raw nerve of, I had a lot of big feelings, and so does everyone. But I think some people are born with just either they can kind of ignore it, or they don't have as big of feelings, or they just are better skilled at dealing with them or processing them. And they just don't feel the need to run away from them. I think as much as some people do, as much as I did. And I think that some people realize pretty quickly that their coping skills are shit and that they need to find better ones. And some people, it takes us a really long time. For me, it took me a really long time to realize that my coping skills were shit. And I still need to be reminded at 47 years old, I still need to be reminded, like, that's actually a terrible, Andrea, like, you know. And so I just, that was a very rudimentary way of sort of explaining how I look at life.
Yeah. I think even though it's unsexy, it's funny because I think about this with my daughter right now, and I think about it for myself. Like I felt as though I was trying when I was younger to develop those coping skills. Like, how do I navigate the part of me inside that feels really scared and like I'm walking on eggshells all the time, because that's how I was raised. Like I was raised with a mom that could explode at any time and lock me out of the house and all kinds of things. How do I start navigating with that little kid inside that's scared? And so for me, I took kind of an intellectual route. I'm going to study all of these different philosophers and I'm also writing. For me, I have to get into we haven't even talked about our own writing, which is a whole other thing, but writing was really what I call my through line to the divine. Like I could actually tap into those places that were suffering and try to like develop some coping skills. But I think you're right. There's some of us that feel things in a more acute manner, or we maybe haven't like figured out those skills that can help us when that acuteness gets really bad.
I was convinced my feelings were going to kill me. Like they are going to murder me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it sounds dramatic, but like, I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally accurate. Like, I mean, I've heard that heartbreak actually, who was it? Like Wayne Dyer or something, like the heart fibers actually start tearing apart. And I think the whole mind body thing is so true. You feel it physically. And if we don't have a sense of like, what can I do that will really actually be a healthy way to navigate these really intense feelings, then we'll go for what, the cultural prescribed anesthetizers.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I could talk to you for 2 more hours, but I have to be cognizant of my listeners' time and your time too. Melissa, thank you so much. It's Blood Orange Night, My Journey to the Edge of Madness, Melissa Bond. The link to your book will be in the show notes. Where do you want people to go to find more of you or your other writings or your book? Is it your website or where should we send them?
Yeah, I would say, so my website is melissabond.com. I am working on another book, so that info will be up there. And then my Instagram handle is Melissa B. Author.
Yeah. And I follow you. So I just thank you so much. And I think that these stories are they need to be told because we hear, like the show Intervention. I remember watching that when I was drinking too much and thinking, well, at least I'm not that,
Right.
And I think we need stories like this of people who don't identify as an addict, who suddenly found themselves prescribed medication that could have killed them, and just the difficulty that you were going through at that time. So thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing your story. And everyone, thank you for listening and hanging with us throughout this hour of conversation. I am so grateful for your time. And remember, it's our life's journey to make ourselves better humans and our life's responsibility to make the world a better place. Bye for now. Hey, did you know there's free secret podcast episodes waiting for you that are not part of my regular podcast feed? Yes, AndreaOwen.com/free. And you just sign up. You get a link sent to you. It's very secret. It's like a secret club. We don't have a secret handshake. Don't worry about that. But it's these motivating podcast episodes that I made for you. They're under 20 minutes each. There's 3 of them. They're for wherever you are in your life. So head on over there and grab them. They range from really supporting you and seeing you where you are and being compassionate, all the way to giving you a giant kick in your ass and telling you how amazing and gorgeous and phenomenal you are. So AndreaOwen.com/free and get your hands on that free podcast feed.
I'd like to introduce you to the Minimalist Moms podcast. It's hard enough being a mom, and the last thing you need is stress from too much stuff and an overcrowded schedule. For too long, I lived with the mindset that bigger was better, and the more I added to my life, instead of feeling better, I felt overwhelmed. It was time for a radical new mindset. Less is more. I'm not into extremes. I didn't throw everything away. My brand of minimalism is more about adding than subtracting. Get rid of the excess to make room for what you love. In other words, it's about living life with purpose. I hope you'll listen in, and my guest and myself can inspire you to think more and do with less. The Minimalist Moms podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts.